Is Battletech a board game or a war game? One or the other, or both. So in this podcast, in this vlog, I want to share with you my thoughts on playing Hex Map versus Wargaming Table, and how it changes the narrative of the game. My ultimate goal is to get as much value out of your Battletech collection, as much value out of my Battletech collection as possible, and to take this awesome narrative, this awesome gaming universe of Battletech, and fit it into the time period, the physical time that we have to play. So that might be classic Battletech. It always seems weird when I say classic. In my mind, it's like, here's Battletech. Maybe we play that on a Hex Map. Maybe we play Alpha Strike. Maybe we play a bigger game on a traditional wargaming table. We want to fit the time to the tactics. So in its first kind of incarnation, Battletech, and I would say a lot of players play on what's called a Hex Map. Terrain is printed on it. Everything is kind of numbered out, so you know this hex is Lightwoods, this hex is Rubble, this hex is a level 2 or a level 3 building. There's no ambiguity about it. You know exactly what is where. The hexes are equal, so it allows you to measure the range of movement. It allows you to measure the range of the weapons, and it allows you to know exactly where the mechs are facing. For a game that relies on, I won't say complex calculations that involve taking a base number and adding on range, adding on movement, adding on various weapon profiles on there. Having the Hex Map makes that very, very easy. You just kind of add up, count, and stack. The challenge in playing a Hex Map is it artificially constricts the tactics of the game. And what I mean by this is not only the different ranges of the weapons in Battletech, a long range, say LRM 20 at the most extreme, well, I guess an autocannon 2 would be even more extreme, versus point blank AC 20, autocannon 20, a massive slug, right in your face with how it's going to go. On those two extremes, if we're playing on a Hex Map, you don't have that many places to go. Yes, there's some elevation. Yes, there's cover. But eventually, all the mechs are going to be able to close with each other and engage with each other. So if your opponent has a heavier and assault mech and you have a fast light mech or a fast medium mech, yes, you're going to be able to dance around the table. Yes, you're going to be able to run around. But eventually, they're going to catch you, or eventually they're going to move to the middle of the map and be able to radiate out and catch you. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Neither. It's just the flavor of the game. I find playing on a Hex Map, and that could be 1 or 2 Hex Maps. As soon as you add 3 or 4 or build out bigger Hex Maps, you're starting to move the game in a different direction in terms of terrain and tactics. Playing on Hex Maps, it forces the pace of the game to be much quicker, a lot more deadly, and it really forces you to figure out, forces you to think, where are you going to commit? So if you move up the center of the table and you occupy some terrain, but your opponent is able to move around that terrain, and now you're in the forest and they're starting to bring up a fire starter or some other flame units, you might not be able to run away. You might not be able to disengage. You've chosen your place, and we're going to fight it out. Compare that to a traditional wargaming table. With a wargaming table, I define that as it could be pre-printed hex maps. I have a neoprene mat that has the hexes kind of painted on them, airbrushed on them, silk screened on them, whatever. But I also have kind of the traditional green, the forest brown type gaming map. Playing on this, now the game is going to take a little bit longer because you have got measuring sticks, or you've got a tape measure that you have to measure out, you have to convert. The facings of the mech, even though the mechs are on hex bases, it now kind of takes an extra second or two. Or it might result in you and your opponent. I prefer the term gaming friend, right? You and your friend figuring out, okay, is that front armor? Is that side armor? Are your weapons in the arc to shoot? It's not always as cut and dry on a wargaming table versus the hex maps on there. And then finally, terrain itself. You're going to have 3D trees, 3D buildings, and other things. Sometimes you might have to make the call, Is that mech obscure? Is that mech in cover? What elevation is that? But I find it's easiest or it's best that after you've set up the gaming table, you take a step back before you roll for mission or deployment, and you discuss with your gaming friend or your opponent in this case, and say, okay, this mountain, this will be level 2 elevation. This pool of water here, what do you think? Want to call it level 1? Want to call it level 2? I run 2 types of trees for my games. I have kind of like these pine foresty type trees and these more kind of bright green trees, with the idea being that the bright green trees, the hex they occupy, will count as type 1 woods, light woods, and the pine trees would count as type 2, heavy type woods on there. So there are ways to kind of look through that and figure it out, but it requires a little bit more calculation. Now, in terms of tactics, a wargaming table is much, much bigger. So the game is going to take longer. But as you're moving forward, you get to pick where you're going to engage, where you're not going to engage. If you start to move up the side of the table and your opponent counters with a lot of excessive force and you don't want to engage, you can pull back. There's places to go. The battle is a lot more fluid. It's a lot more dynamic because it's not artificially constrained with those hex maps on there. The final piece, going back to this idea of exploring Battletech to the best that you can. I would say for me, an average Battletech game that we play every week is about 5,000 to 6,000 battle value. We play it on a wargaming table, and it takes about around 4, 5, 5.5 hours. And that's playing at a nice pace. We've got some, appropriate 80s theme music going on in the background. We're taking a break to grab some pizza and kind of stop mid-game to see what's going on. Kind of that pause for that commentary, see how things are going to play out. Certainly we're not rushing through the game. Yet at other times, if I'm playing at a club or if I'm playing at the store where we have less time to play, 2 hours, 3 hours tops, and space is a premium. Rather than putting it out on my gaming table or my living room table, we literally were playing on a card table here. And if you're playing Battletech, whatever space you have, half of the space is going to be taken up by those battle sheets and dice and markers and rules. There's a lot of support stuff for Battletech compared to other war games that are out there. It's the nature, it's the dynamic of this amazing game. So in that case, I'll play the hex maps. In my terrain box that I bring, in addition to the wargaming terrain, I also bring the hex maps and the counters. So I'm equipped. I'm ready to go either way. From that perspective in playing it, sometimes the hex maps are better because it would be better to get in a small 2,000 battle value quick game of Battletech than not be able to play at all. And this leads us into the podcast for tomorrow, Alpha Strike versus classic Battletech, which always seems weird to me. In my mind, it's just Battletech. What system to play? Both. Using the most of your miniatures. You've got your Battletech miniatures. When you have the time, play Battletech. When you don't have the time, rather than not playing Battletech at all, get in that game of Alpha Strike on there, right? Be ready to explore both based on the time and based on the material that you have.